Ryan, you and I, sometimes we just travel around the world looking at what's happening in the various different factories. But right now, unless you know something I don't, there's nothing happening except the big news in Austin. Maybe there's more to report on this than I know about. I'm hoping so. I haven't even asked you, so this will be interesting, folks. There's some kind of a big data center going down in Austin in the South End. Maybe it's the biggest in the world of its kind. The biggest in the world is always that fun thing, right? So it's the biggest learning computer ever set up in order to do Tesla vehicles. That's for sure,
For sure.
for sure. So anyway, what do you know about this data center? There was pictures this morning of somebody walking through with a jiggly camera showing us various things. Do you know anything at all about where that stands and how it's progressing?
So in terms of the biggest computers in the world, the biggest answer is we don't know and we can't know because the biggest ones are surely government computers and they don't want each other to know. So we don't know how much compute is out there. What I think it's safe to say is that any government run computer is not likely as optimized and efficient as a private computer, I would suspect. Because the motivations are different. When you've got a cost plus contract, the only way to make more money is to charge more for less. And I would point to Boeing as an example of that. If you want to get less, and I mean like, who needs this hatch? Then Boeing is sadly where it's at. There's in every now and then I have an opportunity to speak to someone in the commercial energy world, whether it's power plant engineers or industrial linemen sort of things. And what I love to do is show them pictures of the fans going in Texas. And those are staggering in size. They are ginormous. And then I tell them the expected power consumption, which is, 100 megawatts, perhaps by the end of this year, 500 megawatts within a few years. And that gives them pause, which is, I mean, they are dumbfounded because that is a decent sized city's worth of power.
Yes.
And I had a chance to meet some fans yesterday, some viewers at an event in Stillicum, Washington, because I go to little events. And I met this gentleman named Gary. And Gary said, I wasn't told that YouTube royalty would be here. And I said, oh, that's very kind. And I am YouTube royalty. I am, I'm like Prince Jacob. Is there a Prince Jacob? Who knows? I mean, if there is, there's one person who will recognize him, and that's the level of royalty I am. Is maybe that's the guy from The Thing.
So now people will be calling their neighbors if they have Prince Jacob in a can. Yeah.
Yeah. And some of them do.
Right.
So Gary had this interesting theory. Well, so the first thing is Gary and Rich and I, and Rich is another viewer who came out because he'd seen me promoting the event. We were talking about how close is FSD to solved. And I know there are people who say internally it's already solved. And I don't share that conclusion. Because if it was solved, I don't see why we would need this much compute.
Right.
This is a lot of compute to solve very difficult problems. Well, it could be used for the bot. Yes, it could. But I don't think that's what we're doing. If FSD was solved, they could turn all of the compute that exists over to understanding the bot world. And I think it would get us there on a better time scale. To buy this much compute this early, the price falls constantly. It falls rapidly. Why buy today if you could buy later? And the answer is because we need it, because it's not solved. Now the question is, at Texas, I don't know if you've seen in Joe Tegmeyer's recent video, the giant parking structure they put up barricades to keep prying eyes out of the ground floor. And these barricades they're fences, the kind of fences that you put tarps over. And then they are braced from the outside so that they do not fall. What's in there? What's so enticing that we cannot see it? I saw one prominent figure speculate, well, it could just be equipment that they don't want to get wet. Yeah, you don't need to take those levels of precautions to keep moisture out. No, it's more likely that it's um, that it's something that it's a vehicle.
Yeah, yeah.
Because because if it was just stuff, you could put it in a warehouse a mile away. Wouldn't matter.
And if it was just a Juniper, it's not that different. You're gonna see them anyway. So yeah, it's got to be.
It could still be the Juniper. It
Sure.
could still be the Juniper because we believe that that's going to Shanghai first.
Yeah.
But there's a real trick with having 4 factories making a vehicle as opposed to 2. When it was the Model 3 refresh, when it was the Highland, they did it in Shanghai first because Shanghai is a more effective factory and more effective everything,
Mhm.
and then moved it over to Fremont. But with Juniper, we've got 4 factories on 3 continents.
Yeah.
That's do you do them one at a time? How well is a pre-refresh model going to be selling if it's a year or year and a half after
Right.
other markets have had it? I think they'll have to move a lot more quickly. So it's entirely possible that they'll try and do more than one factory at a time. And it's entirely possible that they're already tooling up to do it in Texas. If people knew that, that would impact sales.
Sure.
But if it's coming in maybe 6 months, maybe a year, maybe longer, that's not going to impact sales the same way as knowing that it's about to happen.
Yeah.
So it could be Juniper, but it could also be, and I think you and I agree on this, it is not. It is the compact, the robotaxi, whatever it is we're going to see next. And whatever it is we're going to see next is, I believe, going to be such a departure that you have to keep it under wraps like this.
Right. Yeah. If it was spotted in the wild, even with camouflage, it would be like, well, we know what that is.
Well, and if it was just a slightly smaller Model 3 or Y, yeah,
right.
we'd look at it and go, well, yeah. But if it's a radical departure,
Yeah.
there are a lot of people who saw the Cybertruck before it rolled on stage, and not one of them leaked a word. The most you would hear is, what I have seen is quite different.
Quite different.
That tells me nothing. That tells me nothing. But on that one, I honestly believe that the journalists who saw it thought they were being clowned on.
Yeah.
They thought, I'm going to leak this, and then I'm going to look like an absolute
Right.
tool when they don't because they're not going to show this. But I think we're at the point where people know that Tesla can surprise
Yeah.
and make it work. So I think the biggest news in sky watching for the week is that something is going on there. Now Gary, who's a very interesting fellow, who I met a couple days ago, said, I've got a theory and I want you to tell me how crazy I am. I think that when that boring tunnel popped up in the south end, that it then went back down and continued over to the parking garage, and that they'll be shuttling Model 2s over there underground. And I said, I don't think that would work because we haven't seen enough tunnel lining sleeves to double the distance, because it'd be about double. And I don't think the amount of dirt, the amount of excavation, all that is commensurate with a run that long. And he said, well, you could be, but all those things could be not hidden on the other side of the highway, but inside the building. I said, yeah, but the conveyor belts are very large. I don't think that's happening, but I love it. It's a great theory, but I love it.
Well, okay. So you on your channel the other day, maybe even today, well, today is probably Tuesday or Wednesday. So it would have been the other day. You were talking about the shock that you are in over how long it's taken them to come up with FSD for the Cybertruck. And that this may be, and also for the Model 3, all the models that have the hardware 3, it's taken longer than any of us thought it would take. The speculation might be that you need all this compute because you're going to have to do all these model changes for General Motors and Ford and Toyota and all the rest of these folks downstream. What about that idea?
So that was another thing that the 3 of us discussed, me, Rich, and Gary, was that the fact that Cybertruck still doesn't have FSD gives us pause to the ease of licensing for other manufacturers. I was of the belief, considering how effortlessly the 3, Y, S, and X can share the same software, that it wasn't a matter of where the cameras are placed, that as long as it can see the 3D world around it, that's a good enough picture to solve. And the fact that Cybertruck isn't still, after all this time, after so many miles logged, is still not working. And then you look at the Semi, and the Semi is out with LiDAR. We saw it the other day doing ground truthing, the validation in that way. It tells me that there's a lot more to it, and that this, if you're going to, I'm Suzuki and I would like to use your FSD. Tesla might look at them and say, you don't have enough models.
Yeah.
You're not going to sell the
Right.
volume necessary for us to, not enough models, but enough
Yes.
sales per model. It's not worth it for us to get it running and validated on your platform. Here's our configuration. If you want to build something that shape, we can make it work. But other than that, so I'm concerned about that. Maybe the new compute will come up with a way to more effortlessly integrate and understand, but that concerns me in terms of a prospect of a licensing deal.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it makes sense. And there was also some speculation, I guess, a model. Did we talk about it last week on this show? I think with you about some Model 3s that were spotted, or Model Ys that were spotted with odd camera arrangements and no mirrors. And so I think the speculation was that this was the model that these cameras were located where they would be located on the new CyberCab. Yeah.
That's my belief as well. And you can always shift priorities on the server farm.
Right.
You can literally say, stop doing all this other compute and dedicate 100% of it to this.
Right.
And that will, of course, accelerate it. But we don't get to see behind that curtain and know how it works.
Yeah. Okay. So this huge amount of compute going in there, a huge amount of additional compute going in Buffalo. Already have a massive amount of compute in Fremont. We have the probable opportunity to share some kinds of information with the massive computer that's going in Memphis. So between all of these computers that that the family owns, the Elon Musk family owns, would that potentially then be the largest corporately owned compute capability in the world?
It's the wrong question. So compute comes in different forms.
Yeah.
Are we counting just ones in a single room? Because if we're counting ones that are in different rooms, then I would say Google or Amazon server farms are much bigger. And maybe even their processing is much bigger. But it's a question of what it does. And in terms of AI farms, this will be among the biggest, if not the biggest, because the other guys don't have problems with this much money to solve. They have problems to solve, but if they don't have a direct path to monetizing them, it's hard to invest billions and billions. We do know Facebook, Meta, has been adding as much or more than Tesla, just not all in one location and not all dedicated to one thing. Pretty soon they'll be so good at serving you ads, Randy. It'll be amazing.
That's assuming I've ever spent in the last 8, 10, I can't remember last time I was on Facebook.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't do it, man. I just can't do it. It's, I get it. Some of the people I went to high school with have turned out to be truly awful people, but that's not a sufficient reason to hang out.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, so that's interesting. I think people talk about the reasons to own Tesla, and certainly up there among all those reasons would be that we've got a guy that probably knows as much or more than anybody in the world about AI, AGI, the singularity, all the things that people are working on right now in terms of changing our future. But also, it's not just him. Now he's got the compute, the inference, the chips, the manufacturing capacity, and probably we know, the largest 2 markets that are even comprehensible at this point. Nobody's even suggesting, labor would be the #1 market. Okay, we can all agree on labor is the #1 market. Cars right now would be the number 2 market of usable, embodied AI. Now, what would be number 3, or what would be bigger than any one of those 2 markets? I haven't seen anybody come out and say, oh, here's one that's bigger than robotaxi.
Well, it's interesting because as you zoom out, the picture changes completely. If you start with something like autonomous driving,
Right.
when you zoom out, you say, well, I don't even know what else. Well, what's bigger than the job of driving? Driving is the #1 profession in the US.
Right.
What's bigger than that? And if you zoom out, the only answer is all labor.
Labor. Yeah.
And if you zoom out farther than that, I don't think there is any. I mean, then I guess zooming out is invent labor for robots to do. And I think that is the next frontier, is jobs that are not being done because they can't be at either any kind of price or any kind of safety level. The example I give is send a swarm to just rove the bottom of the ocean picking up trash. It would be an infinite job, but I feel like it's something we kind of should do, but it will never be done because it's too dangerous. It's too expensive. There's no money in it.
Well, I think we could get that same band of robots to start with the LA freeways, and then we could go from there. Yeah.
Well, and that is also a thing, is that is a very expensive, never-ending job full of biohazard.
Right.
Robots don't need to concern themselves with hepatitis.
No, or with being run over by wild drivers either. Yeah.
There is a concern, but it's much, much smaller.
Oh.
It is a concern of cost and danger to the occupants of the vehicle, much smaller concern than, a human doing that job. And yeah, there's a lot of jobs like that that are either too dangerous or just not profitable enough to address.
I think we're on the edge of something pretty amazing. We've been talking about that for years now, and we'll look forward to what is going to be the next step. The next step. Oh, you got.
I do have a couple things to add. One is, so Jeff Lutz at the X Takeover said, what comes after humanoid bots? Non-humanoid bots. Once you get out of the humanoid form factor,
Yes.
now you can imagine if you need to do a plumbing repair, and instead of digging up the entire line to the street, you can send an itty bitty welding robot in there to fix it. That's embodied AI and robotics, and it's going to be another money saver. The thing is, a lot of people will look at videos like these that we're doing and say, great, all these things are coming. How come the stock doesn't move? I invested, at the all-time highs and I'm down. Well, I don't know who told you to invest at the all-time highs. It wasn't me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not that guy. But I also didn't tell people to invest at the all-time lows. You have to understand what you're looking at and beware of hype cycles. And Tesla at its all-time high was absolutely in a hype cycle. It had all of the elements hitting at once, and then that drove some speculation, and then a media frenzy, and then a social media frenzy. And everybody thought it just goes up and to the right, and sometimes it doesn't. Right. So why hasn't the stock moved? Because the market isn't always rational, but the market always does catch up. Over the short term, it's what's the saying? Over the short term, it's a emotion thing.
It's a betting thing, and then it becomes a balancing. I forget, darn it.
At any rate, over the short term, no matter how good a company is, you can lose money. Over the long term, only fundamentals matter. And if any of these moonshots pan out, and I think one or two or all of them could, then the price to earnings ratio can only go so low. And that's where the money is. And even if by some odd twist of miracle fate, the stock price just stayed low while earnings continued to climb, eventually there would be dividends or buybacks.
Yes.
And both of those would make your shares perform in better ways.
Yes, absolutely true. May I close now?
You are free to close.
Well, I'm almost free. I'm cheap.
Well, coffee's for closers.
I see. I think. Ryan, as always, follow the guy. It's always good to follow him, but send the money to me on Patreon. No. It's been great talking to you.